Hey everyone, this is Lynn Saprell from thenewhomemaker.com, here to show you how to make country wine, which is what Sandor Katz calls it in his book, Art of Fermentation. If you don't have that book, strongly recommend it. Links to it at the bottom of the video. This is what it looks like. This is what it looks like. It's really pretty color, at least this batch. You can make it from any number of fruits. It comes out often tasting kind of like a cider. You drink it pretty young. It can be anywhere from hardly alcoholic at all to having a pretty good kick. This is kind of in the middle. I'd say maybe 3%. Haven't really measured it. Tastes a lot like a cider. A little bit fizzy, a little bit tart. Pretty darn good. Here's how you make it. Here's what you need to make fizzy or country wine. You need, my favorite thing to make this kind of thing in, a sun tea jug. Sun tea jugs are available usually in the summer. Often you can get them off season in like a Goodwill. It's just a big glass jar with a spigot on the bottom. It's got a simple top like that. That's what I like to use as my fermentation chamber. Next thing you need is fruit. The other thing you need is sugar water. And this sugar water was prepared the night before. It is 3.5 quarts of water and a cup of sugar. You bring the 3.5 quarts of water to a boil, and then you add a cup of sugar until it dissolves. Take it off the heat and let it sit overnight. And the reason you want to let it sit overnight is to let the chlorine out of the water. I don't have a filter. I don't really care about filtering, but in any kind of fermentation, you're going to want to use either filtered water or water that's been let sit for 24 hours or water that's been boiled and let to cool. You want to let it cool for sure. That gets the chlorine out of the water because chlorine does mess with your ferments. Most of the time, country wine will ferment on its own, but sometimes it needs a little help. This is champagne yeast. You can get this at any brewing supply shop or winemaking supply shop. I get mine at F.H. Steinbart just down the street. This one's already been opened. It's been in my freezer, which is where I keep all of my yeasts. Like that, and I just keep it closed when I've been using it with a little clippy. So we're going to put that aside for now. You've got all your stuff together. You've got your fruit. You've got your sun tea jar. You've got your sugar water. You've got yeast in case you need it. You take your sun tea jar. You put your fruit in the sun tea jar. You may note I'm keeping the tops on. I don't really think it's necessary to take them off in my experience. You may find it's different for yours. I frankly can't remember what Sandor Katz says to do. If you buy his book, The Art of Fermentation, you'll find out. But I find that when I make this stuff, it just really doesn't matter. Now, as I said, I'm using strawberries and raspberries. You can use whatever works best for you, whatever you have to hand. You can use trimmings, you can use leftovers. The first batch of this I made, I used a batch of cherries that I found in my freezer. They've been sitting there for something like 2 years. I was cleaning out my freezer. I couldn't stand looking at them anymore. I didn't have plans for them, even though they were delicious. And so I made a ferment out of them. They were fantastic. Man, that was good. But it did need help from the champagne yeast, that batch. And I think it's because the cherries had been in the freezer so long. So let's pour that raspberry juice in there, that good raspberry juice. And we'll put some of the softer raspberries in there. Yeah. My friend Sarah gave these to me yesterday. And they're really good. We're hoping next year that our raspberries will be on and I'll be able to do this kind of thing with them. This is a great way, as I said. See, there's nothing wrong with this raspberry. It's just kind of a little bit squishy. So it's perfectly good. It's just maybe not want to eat it out of hand. So you can see, got about that much in the bottom of the jar. Can you see that? Hard to see because of the watermelons on the outside of the jar. But it's about maybe a quarter full of fruit. You don't really need to mash the fruit or anything. If you're worried about making sure you have a good ferment, if you're worried about it, you can mash them a little bit. Again, I find it doesn't really make a difference. Once you've got your fruit in your sun tea jar, you take your batch of sugar water and you just pour it in. And that's probably That's probably all I'm going to be able to get in there. See, I've got some left. It's better to have a little bit too much than not quite enough. You can use this sugar water for, I don't know, you can make some sweet tea with it. I'll figure out something to do with it, I'm sure. So you want to leave a little bit of room at the top, right about at the shoulder. So now we're ready to put these on to ferment, put this on to ferment rather. This one's already been fermenting. This is some kombucha, and I brought this out to show you the difference between the ways you want to set things up for the fermentation. If you're going to use yeast, and I've decided to put a little bit of champagne yeast into this one, you want to, or you can use a regular lid like this one. This is the lid that came with the Sun tea jar. You want to put it on, you want some kind of lid on here so that you don't get bugs in your ferment. You don't want an airtight lid or you might blow up the whole jar. You don't want to do that. And we're not making wine, so we don't need to put it in a carboy with an airlock or anything like that. If you're going to a wine store, they may tell you that you need to do that. Not the case with this. It's not going to be fermented that long. At most, you're going to be leaving it a week. So you don't really need all that. So if you're going to be using a domestic yeast, as I like to call it, you can use the lid that came to Sun tea. If you're going to be trying to catch a wild yeast, you're going to want to do something like this. This is just an old clean dish towel. It's stained, but it's clean, trust me. And then this is a hairband. See, it's a Sun tea jar with kombucha in it. I need to put more sugar water in it. In fact, that's probably where that leftover sugar water is going to go. This lets the air in, but it keeps the bugs out. And for catching a wild yeast, this is probably your best bet. So you're going to want to put a full packet of this. Will do 5 gallons of wine, and this is only a gallon's worth of sugar water here. So you're going to want to put in, let's see, how much did I put in last time? I put a half teaspoon of this in here. Yeah, that looks about right. I know a lot of people don't like it when people like me dibby-dab stuff rather than give measurements, but I tell you what, this stuff was not done by measurement by the people who invented this process. They kind of went, that looks pretty good. This is a very forgiving process. Fermentation is extremely forgiving. So I'm just going to sprinkle that in there, and then I'm going to take my ugly green plastic spoon, and I'm going to give that a stir. And that's one of the things that Katz says with country wine, especially if you're trying to catch a wild yeast, is to stir, 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 stir. If you pass it, and you got a second, grab your version of the ugly green plastic spoon, and just get in there and stir, 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 stir. I do this anyway, and I use champagne yeast, so that's just a good thing to do. And then you put the lid on, you screw it down, then you put this in some place that's not too warm, not too cool, and you're going to basically forget about it until you look at it and give it a stir. Just let it sit for a while. We let ours sit for between 3 and 5 days, depending on how warm it is. And then when it's finished, we get easy caps. It's 3 days later. Now it's time to rack off the Fizzy. All right, so we have our country wine in our Sun tea jar, and this is where the Sun tea jar really comes in handy because of the spigot. Take your easy cap bottle and a funnel, and in you go. You just fill up your bottles. I like to fill mine just over the shoulder. Oh, that's a little too much. Pour some of that back in. That's about right. And that's how you make country wine, aka Fruit Fizz. Thanks for watching. This is Lynn from The New Homemaker. See you next time.